Good afternoon.
Good evening. Welcome to being here.
Yes.
I'm Ariel.
I'm Shia.
And you are limitless.
What do you mean by that?
I have no clue.
I didn't think you did. That's why I asked the question. But as I asked the question, I got a little answer for myself.
What is your answer for yourself?
We set our own limits. We say what limits us. And that is consistent with the story of our life that we put together at a very young age that has continued playing on our computer ever since. So if you tell yourself you're not good at something, you get to be right.
I actually think I'm not good at something is sometimes code for I don't want to.
Yeah, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not either. You know, let's take fly fishing, for example.
Yes,
You are a natural.
I am.
You really are. I have to work at it. So even though I am good, it's not natural for me. I limit what's possible by my story that I am not a natural at it.
I wasn't good at first. At some point, I had
You
enough
chose to do it.
I had enough expertise that
Yes, but see, you can have all the expertise in the world. Remember that fellow who could cast so far and you caught all the big fish?
That's true.
Right. So having the expertise does not produce the result. It's also got to do with allowing yourself to be magnificent.
There he goes. Yes.
That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
When I said I have no clue, it's not actually accurate. When I realized that people think of themselves in a limited way,
Yes.
it really does go through the story of their life. I often use an example. It doesn't really work on an audio unless you imagine it. And that is, I'm sitting here at the computer with Shia, and I have a pair of glasses that I haven't been wearing. But if I put those glasses on, in this case, I can actually see everything on the screen more clearly, although it gets reflected by our ring light. So, you can't see my eyes.
Well, not only does it get reflected by your ring light, it gets reflected off the screen that you're looking at.
So I don't tend to wear it on Zoom. But if we let go of the details of my glasses and realize that in glasses, you're putting something in front of your face that you're looking through, which in my case makes the screen crisper. But most of us have a story that we put on.
We put on our story glasses.
And we put our story glasses on, and then we look through the story.
And those glasses, that story contains the limitations, the self-perceived limitations that you put on yourself as a young child, because the story has continued. This is the endless story.
Now, part of many of our endless stories is my mom always told me I was no good at this, or my dad always berated me and said XXX. And now we want to blame our self-limitations on something we heard from somebody. It's so much more convenient.
Well, I've got ABC.
ABC?
Yeah, ABC, CDS, whatever the local, what do they call that acronym for some mental disorder, like
ADHD?
Yeah, that stuff, right. You've got all the reasons in the world why you have limitations. But look, I have dyslexia. I had to think to find the word. I had dyslexia as a child. Dyslexia? No, I just believe in dog.
Yeah. As opposed to God.
That's right.
Words kind of
exactly
flip around.
Yes. So I am dyslexic and have been since my early childhood, and I had really difficult times learning to read and things of that nature.
That's the story.
But I have recently discovered that I can read if I'm interested in the subject matter.
It really is about being fully engaged.
Well,
When
actually,
Shia is fully engaged, I noticed that in general, words don't mess around on you anymore.
that's right. It's when there's space in between. When I decided to go to college, when I couldn't read, when I had graduated high school, I hired a tutor to teach me how to read. And what he did, he was very smart. He found books that would capture my imagination, adventure books like Pitcairn's Island or Men Against the Sea, Mutiny on the Bounty, things like that. And they engaged me sufficiently to pull me past my idea that I couldn't read.
Today, why not harness your imagination whilst listening to pull you past any self perceived limitations? Because if you take a look at Shia's dyslexia, for instance, it is part of his brilliance. His mind works differently than mine. I love that. It is one of the greatest assets in my life, that the way he sees when I listen to it is an amazing opening, endless epiphanies always.
Well, let's talk about listening. See, listening is surrendering your point of view to another's point of view. It's allowing what they say to come in without filtering it through what you believe to be true or your normal way of seeing life. It's looking through their eyes. That's what listening is. And that's what Ariel's describing. That's why I can say it the way I just did.
It doesn't make you less. That I can listen to Shia's greatness is reflective of my greatness.
Yes.
People who are insecure find it difficult to listen to other people because they might be found out, they might be found less, they might hear something and make a mistake. As you discover and relax in to your own brilliance, it's so easy to hear other people. Nothing is threatening, including the idea that you are brilliant, which generally goes against the stories we harbor.
Yes.
If you listen to last week's show, I believe it was Maiken who was talking about how challenging it is to recognize her greatness or her limitlessness. And we suggested that she take on our perspective, or in general, her husband's perspective, rather than listen to the story, because that is part of what leads you into the moment and leads you into.
Well, what leads you into the moment is listening, not, the voice in your head is very noisy and it always wants to be right. And that isn't you. And when you listen to that voice, you get in trouble. When you get interested in what's going on, that voice drops away. When you get fully engaged in what's going on with whatever you're doing, that voice leaves you alone because you ignore it. Otherwise,
Or include
otherwise,
it.
or include it. Otherwise, it's like the stars; they're always there. The sun eclipses them, so it doesn't appear that they're there in daylight, but they are. And so is that voice. It's always there on tap.
Let's call in our first guest, shall
Yes.
we? Naz, where are you zooming in from today?
Hello, Erin and Shire. I'm zooming in from Cheshunt in the UK, which is just outside of London.
Oh, lovely. How far
Sweet.
outside of London are you?
It's about 15 minutes, really just a stone's throw.
So are you east, west, north, or south of London?
Sorry, north, in between. So we have London, there's Cheshunt, and just a bit further up is Cambridge. So in between London and Cambridge.
So every time we worked in Cambridge, we drove past you and didn't even know it.
We moved there very recently.
Oh, okay, good. So
Yes, and it's really lovely to be here. And I was caught by the title of the show, Limitless. And one of the things that really caught me about it was the idea that our perceived self-limitations can be part of our magnificence. And just hearing you speak about Shire's gift of dyslexia really touched and moved me. Because I find that there are moments when I feel limitless, and then there are moments when I come up face to face with my, my voice, if you like.
Well,
And
I'm looking at you via Zoom, and it's very interesting to me because you are really a beautiful woman. Okay. And I know that's hard to take. But when I first met you, you were a beautiful woman too, but there was a difference. You have gained a sense of security in yourself that you didn't have back then. And you were trying to use your knowledge base to provide that security. What you knew was not who you were. What you knew were things you'd read and what you've heard about enlightenment. And you were being enlightened at the cost of your magnificence and your enlightenment. Because you can't do being enlightened, but you could be enlightened. It doesn't take
that's
much. It just has to do with a willingness to be where you are and as you are and engage in your life like it's your idea. That's enlightened.
You know, as you were saying that, Shai, I realized most people get stuck in trying to prove to themselves or to others what they know. And what I've been seeing about you recently is you celebrating that which you don't know.
Which is so much more than what you know.
I know there's a group of people who have a excitement about transformation, who've gotten together to find ways to promote Living Made Easy seminars and transformation and this podcast on social media. And there are days like International Coffee Day. There are certain days of the year. And one of the days coming up at some point is Ask a Stupid Question Day. And I saw the emails going back and forth talking about how there's no such thing as a stupid question. And I really see you celebrating asking questions. You'll come to a Living Made Easy and you'll say, how does that work? Or,
you know, there is this thing called beginner's mind in Zen. And beginner's mind is where you are interested in what's going on, but you don't think you already know it. So you can actually see what the master is saying rather than compare yourself and find yourself as limited. Each moment is an opportunity to be a beginner. I mean, the other day, I went down our basement because the dehumidifier that we have was making noise. And I looked and I saw that the vents that sucked the air through it were all clogged with dust and debris. Detritus. Detritus. And I took it apart. I removed it from the wall where it was mounted. I took it apart. I vacuumed it clean. I put it back together. And I had tried to take it apart before, but decided I didn't know how to do it because I had some self-limitations on my abilities at that time. And so this time I didn't. I just looked and everything became obvious. If you look, everything becomes obvious in the seeing of what is. It's not trying to figure it out intellectually, but there's a certain obviousness to things, like the screws that held it to the wall had their, a square type of driver head, which was unusual. And I found one, and I put it on my drill, and I removed those screws, and it came off the wall. It was simple, but it wasn't simple in my thoughts. Your thoughts are complex. Your mind is complex. Your universe is simple for the most part. I don't know that I could understand astrophysics or things of that nature, but looking allows you to find solace
Well, two things
and peace in your life.
about that. If you had a need or an interest in astrophysics, you
Right.
would.
Perhaps, yes.
Like, I have found that anything I truly need
Or truly interested in,
and
truly
truly interested in becomes
simpler.
simpler. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. I mean, I have to say, I find I used to get really tense about not knowing.
You see, but
And
that's the thing. You can't know what you don't know. So you have to forgive yourself for not knowing, because you couldn't possibly know what you don't know.
and that's one of the things, just coming to your seminars and just experiencing the community and listening to your podcast has given me. There's a joy in discovering that I didn't think was possible. Yeah, I'm really super grateful.
And not knowing is not a shortcoming. It just means you don't know something.
It's like curiosity, allowing yourself to be curious without thinking that not knowing makes you less. There's something so exciting when you're interested in discovering what you don't know, because you're already so wealthy. So anything else is just like yummy, as opposed to confirmation that you're not good enough.
Yeah, and you know, it's really supported me in I'm in my teaching. I teach 3 days a week. I'm an educator, and it's really supported me with my students and recognizing that it really is okay not to know, and we can learn and discover things together, which has brought a richness to my teaching. It's brought a richness to my relationships with my students. And recently I got a card from a student where it says, "Thank you so much for making a difference in my life," which was so beautiful.
Well, you know, Naz, the other difference you make is by listening. And you've been training yourself by taking our seminars to truly listen to people. And I guarantee you, the rest of his teachers or her teachers do not listen. They think about what's being said. They jump to conclusions. They go way ahead. They think they know what's being talked about, and they don't get the information. They don't get the child.
Or the adult, if you're teaching adults. You know, it's interesting, as you were talking about how you're an educator and you teach 3 days a week.
2.
Did you say 2 or 3?
Oh, 3.
3.
I heard 2.
Ah, well, see, what can you do 3 days a week? And that I saw your face as you're talking about them and your experience of it. In there, it's very different than my experience back when of a lot of educators. They were the top and I was the learner down below somewhere. And it's clear that you are creating an experience of an exchange of ideas where learning can happen in partnership with your students rather than having to hold a position. And I think that as we first met,
held a position.
would have had to hold a position.
When you're insecure, you need a position to give you security. But when you're secure in yourself, then you can hear anything. It doesn't mean anything bad. It just means what it means.
And I've noticed a shift as well from when I was first teaching to to now when I'm teaching, and I really enjoy it. There was a time I didn't, and there is a real enjoyment about it, which has really surprised me.
Well, the time you didn't was when you had your attention on how you were doing rather than being interested in how your students are doing.
I also think it was in part something that we talked about at a recent Living Made Easy with somebody. They had segmented their life into their day job and their creative job, whether it's, I really am an inspiring writer, but I'm doing this to make money in the meantime, or I'm really an inspiring actress and this is my job. I'm doing my day job. Back then, I'll bet you weren't as accomplished as an author as you are now. And somehow you thought that teaching was a lesser profession than being a published author.
Totally. I had to get out of teaching because I had been done with teaching, and now I'm on to my new career.
Darling, it doesn't matter what you do. It matters what you bring to what you do. I was in a Costco store a couple of days ago.
Which is one of these big stores where you can buy things in bulk.
Buy all sorts of things. And occasionally they have vendors that aren't part of that store, but they have a booth there, a kiosk, where they're selling different things.
That's how we found our hex-clad pans.
Right.
Was originally at a Costco, somebody demonstrating them.
And so there was this guy showing a knife set there. And it was an American-made knife, and it was very sharp, or the whole set. And they didn't need sharpening for 10 years. But you know something? I really, really get great pleasure from sharpening our knives. So it would go against my whole way of being to have a knife that didn't never need sharpening, because I enjoy doing that. So I tried to explain it to the guy who was selling these knives. And I took out my pocket knife and I said, look, and my pocket knife was just as sharp as his knives. He says, yes, but you wouldn't eat with that. I said, oh, I do. And I had to be careful because I didn't want to hurt his feelings. And I was interested in looking at these knives, but I don't need them or want them because I don't need them. I have absolutely sufficient. And like I say, I get a great deal of pleasure sharpening my knives.
Let's go back to what you said, because I find it exciting. You said you had to get rid of your teaching profession and move on to the real thing. And now that you've done the real thing, you're published and published multiple times, and you do really well. And now I love that you were successful in that, because you discovered that, I'm putting these words in your mouth, but I bet you they're true. Satisfaction doesn't come from that you're not a better person once you're published than before you were published, even though that was your idea before you were published.
Look, there are thousands, if not millions, of unhappy published authors. Attaining your goals does not produce satisfaction. Allowing yourself to discover the limitless nature of your being is satisfying.
And I love what you say, because before I had this idea that, I want to be a published author and then I'll be super successful. And coming to your seminars, I'm really grateful that I am published. I'm grateful that I'm able to tell the stories, but there's a different quality to my writing. Before, I was writing to get somewhere, to get published. These days, I'm writing because it gives me joy and gives me pleasure to tell stories and to share them, because I just have, I enjoy it.
Yes.
And the difference.
Yes. One is self-expression from the perfection of this moment. And the other is the ever elusive, someday I will be satisfied when.
Yeah.
But that's a fantasy. The reality is you're satisfied if you're here doing what you're doing like it's your idea rather than something that's been imposed from outside. And for most people, even if it is their idea, they hold it like it's been imposed from outside.
You know,
Yeah.
in the lead up to this, when we did this description for this episode, we talked about when you're being here, even your self-perceived limitations are part of your magnificent. You operated through those earlier self-perceived limitations, the ones that said, I need to focus and only do this. I can't have distractions. Now you have a full life and you write, and there's joy in it. But part of the magnificence is that you are a living, breathing example of possibility, so that people who start with that limited idea can meet you, and they don't have to linearly go through all of the roads you went. You can say, oh, no, that one's a dead end. You could just be here, and suddenly they can leap over that should they choose.
And paradoxically, you had to go through all of those dead ends that you went through to make it here.
Yes.
Which is just so lovely. It's all perfect.
It is indeed. Thank you both so much.
You're
you
so
so
welcome.
much.
You are truly so welcome. You are such a gift, my dear.
Oh, thank you.
You're very, very welcome. It's time for our listener feedback spotlight.
Okay, so here we go.
We're going to hear from one of our listeners about how transformation has impacted her life or his life. Let's see.
Yeah. And if you'd like to learn more about what we're up to, you could register for any of our upcoming virtual courses.
Or sign up for our newsletter. Just visit
transformationmadeeasy.com.
It really is easy.
It is easy if you know the way.
Hi, I'm Ralf.
And Arne.
And we are from Cologne, Germany.
Yeah.
And what we love about transformation is that we love each other so much.
Yeah.
Out of that.
and have fun. And it's after seminars, we are so happy we can tell. So we can hug everybody. We are smiling the whole time. And we know that our life is very, very good.
Do you want to have well-being with consistency? Connect with people all over the world from the comfort of your own home at Aaron and Shire's lively interactive Living Made Easy virtual seminars. Join any of their 2-hour online events or take a deep dive into the magic of being you at a virtual weekend seminar. Come on, let's connect. Find out more and register at transformationmadeeasy.com.
If you thought you recognized the voice of the person who was making announcements in between, you did. That was Naz. She was kind enough to do the information about listener spotlights and invitations on our podcast. So clearly she's a brilliant, brilliant lady, and I love her voice.
I do too.
Upcoming, we have seminars, not this Saturday, but Monday night, and then Tuesday evening, Central European time on the 14th. We have our Tuesday evening translated into German seminar. So it's English and German. You can join us for that. Also coming up on Saturday the 18th. And then the following weekend is our Simplicity seminar on the 25th and 26th. And life is simple if you're here for it and you're seeing it and you're listening and being here. And we're all going to get together and, as a laboratory, invest in the moment, and you are invited.
Invest in the simplicity of the moment. Invest in being rather than thinking about.
Such a relief.
Yes.
You're invited if you'd like to register for any or all, or sign up for our newsletter, our blog, any of those things. You can go to transformationmadeeasy.com and register or sign up today.
And Costa Rica 2022 is now open for registrations. There is a prerequisite, and that is that you attend the virtual seminar this year with us.
A virtual weekend seminar or an in-person seminar. It looks like there will be one. But again, check transformationmadeeasy.com. Our next guest.
Our next guest,
Yes.
Judy.
Where are you zooming in from?
This is Judy, and I'm zooming in from New York City. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I really like this topic. When I was going to say, when I think about being limitless, there's certain things I always just assume I can do. I'm very athletic. So I had recently gotten a new bicycle, and I just assumed I would be able to ride. It wasn't going to be a problem. And then I took it out to the park, and I was like, oh, this isn't easy as I thought it would be, because I live by Central Park, and Central Park's rather hilly. So it was fun.
And when you walk it, you don't recognize how hilly it is.
Right.
And it's a whole different set of muscles than the walking ones, as we have discovered.
So I walked it up some of the hills, but even going down the hills, it was funny to watch how my mind went through this, because I was watching all the people pass me as I felt like the little old lady on the bicycle, like as people are passing me. And then so at certain points I would just walk up the hill, but when you go down too, it's a whole other ball game. So, but it was funny. There are certain areas where I just think I'm very limited, and I would say that's in relationship or
But you know what's interesting? What's very interesting, Judy, is that you are limited by the conversation that you listen to that says you're limited.
Right.
See, the only reason you don't have a relationship is you don't want one right now. Because if you really wanted one, you would discover what it takes to be there in the uncomfortableness of intimacy. Because being intimate is uncomfortable. It's a creation. It's a creative moment where there's always the fear of rejection.
I even feel like that with like friends or people, especially after this year of pandemic where I've spent so much time alone. It's kind of resurfaced.
Well, wasn't it a gift having all that time alone?
Yes.
You didn't have to confront being with people, the intimacy of being there.
And the other thing is, you weren't alone. You were kept company by that voice. You had a very noisy friend.
Right.
And it's interesting, you were talking about intimacy and relationship, Judy. It's not, when we signed on today, you and Naz were having a conversation, and you were talking something about you and work and something you were surprised about. I have found that relationship has nothing to do with self-introspection. You think somewhere that looking at how you're doing, or looking at how you relate, or looking at what you've done, or looking at past relationships, or analyzing how you go about it, has anything to do with relationship success.
It does, but not success. It has to do with relationship failure.
It has to do with
Because
repetition of
you-
what you've done before.
You either do what you did before or don't do what you did before, but you don't create in the moment. You don't discover what it takes to be with another in the moment because you've got this story that you're not good at it.
Well, I did have a outcome to what I was talking about, but I think what you say, Shia, takes me to the 3 principles, and that's so important. If you're analyzing what you did or how you relate, in come the 3 principles, because you're looking at something that you did or didn't do, including the outcome of some of your past dating life, and you don't like it, and you're looking at ways to improve on it. What you don't like, you repeat. Anything you resist persists, grows stronger, dominates your life, and repeats over and over again. Second, this moment is perfect. So you are currently, along with your self-perceived limitation of being a single lady, perfect. This moment is perfect, and you have exactly what you want. Third principle, anything you see without judging completes itself, which brings me to my idea and what I see in relationship. It does me no good to look at how I'm relating to Shia. It does me a lot of good to look at Shia and see how he, it's not reacts, but I can see if he has well-being in relation to me. And if not, I may say, are we okay? How's it going? And he'll tell me. You look at you rather than looking out.
That's correct. Yes.
Yes, well, you'll never find the answer of how to be if you look at how you were.
Yeah.
Because you're just going back and repeating how you were.
Or the opposite of how you were, which is a pendulum swing.
And that's still how you were, not what is appropriate. The appropriateness shows up when you're here to see it.
You know, pendulum
Right.
is going back and forth, but it's always on a string. It's connected to something rather than right here, right now.
It's funny.
See, life is showing up newly in each moment. Unless you're listening to your story that compares the moment to what's come before it. And that's like driving down the road, looking in the rearview mirror and having your hands on the rearview mirror, not the steering wheel. You cannot predict the future looking at your past unless you repeat your past.
Right.
But the road has different zigs and zags than what you just went through.
I want to go back to something you said about how challenging it is after the pandemic to go out and be with people. That is part of your story. Your thought process said that. It's repeated it multiple times. You've probably verbalized it to other people, but you're certainly verbalizing it again now. I can hear when people are saying something they might not have thought of before, or they're articulating something new. That clearly is a repetitive thought. And it justifies something.
What does it justify?
It justifies the behaviors you've had. It justifies keeping things exactly as they've been. And you get to be right that you have limitations.
You should go back and listen to the episode that we did with Emmy. You can't hear it right now because it hasn't been released. We're recording this episode on the same day recorded that one. But when this comes out and when hers come out, listen, because we were talking to her in last week's episode about relaxing into urgency. You know, she has this urgency to date and find a man, but really she's happy where she is. And you can talk to yourself about how difficult it is. And that may be code for, I don't really want it right now.
Right.
And by the way, bicycle riding, where you have to get off the bike and walk it part way up the hill, isn't about your limitation. I mean, that's the point of why you got the bicycle, not only because it looked like fun, but for exercise. So you're just revealing to yourself that you have muscles that you'd like to strengthen. You have the story, I'm athletic, but in reality, there are certain muscle groups that aren't
Being used.
or hadn't been used in a long time.
A very long time, yes.
Well, a very long time is part of the story.
And see, if you hear what Ariel just said, it was complete. You're adding in is a way of not listening to what she says.
But it also is promoting herself. It's
Yes,
a
and
window
al-
into herself
And it,
perceived limitations.
right, and it also promotes your limitations, which I have heard over and over again from you, especially around work, where you're so profoundly surprised that
They like
they
you.
like you, or that they find your work satisfactory or outstanding.
Or you're profoundly surprised that you have ease speaking with the upper echelon as you do with a coworker or somebody who you are managing. Of course you have ease with that. You've been investing in the ability to be a partners with people for many, many years. So that shouldn't be a surprise to you anymore. If anything, it's about looking out and seeing how you can foster that in other people who don't necessarily have that level of ease.
That's an awesome idea. I like that.
I like it
Good.
too. I like it too. It may just be time, Judy,
Yes,
to admit how magnificent you are.
really.
I have a question. What is the downside to admitting your magnificence?
What comes to mind is when I was about 12 or 13, all the girls, I had thrilled to rose, I was a tomboy. All the girls in junior high tried out for the boys track team. I made the track team. And then I kind of couldn't quit because I was the only girl on it, but I really liked sports. I happened to be at the time a high jumper, and I loved it. And it was, I went out to, it wasn't even to prove that I was good at it. It was just, people weren't kind to me. They were really unkind, and they were unkind.
Yeah, but you're blaming people's unkindness on your being a track star rather than people are unkind. And then you use that to limit your self-expression into life.
It seems kind of silly now because it's like
12 years old. How old are you now?
61. That's
50 years, 51 years later, or 49 years later.
Yeah, it's funny. It's kind of funny when I say it out loud.
I like it because when you tapped into it, it had emotion. It was believable. It was a really good story. And yeah, in a psychological framework, that will constrain you for the rest of your life.
But in a transformational framework,
it's part of what makes you brilliant. That past, and we've all had them. We've all had traumas in grade school and high school, and we've all had people who are unkind to us.
And we've all had humiliations along the way. But so what?
I recall in 8th grade, we went away to a camp. Our whole class went away to a camp, and all these schools went to this overnight camp. And every day they had one kid stand up and go, the temperature today is 68 degrees. And the next one would go, sunrise is at, the next one would go, and humidity today is, and it was my job to report the humidity.
And you did humility?
The humility today is 43%. And everybody laughed at me. It was so traumatic. Clearly, I shouldn't lead groups or say anything out loud for the rest of my life.
Right.
Now I'm very glad you lead groups.
Well, we're very glad you're in our life.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'm very happy to be in your life.
good.
Excellent. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for
Judy.
having me.
Our pleasure.
Hey, if you want to be a guest or submit a listener spotlight, go to transformationmadeeasy.com/being here and find out how. It's been a treat being here today. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week because next week's episode is,
Ageless.
so come on back.
And don't miss
Being
being
here.
here.